So, Chapter 14 of Boruto's Two Blue Vortex is officially out. Well, it's officially leaked. In a poorly translated sense. But still, I got enough context to figure out what was going on and what was being said and by who. And while a lot does happen in this chapter, ironically, one of the most important things that happens, at least from the prospects of making theories about this chapter, happened with the first leak we were given by the Boruto official page. Because for those of you who don't know, the Boruto official page leaks one page a couple days prior to the release and leaked a second page the day before. And in the first leak, we were given an image of Sakura trying to heal what used to be Inajin's puncture wound, and her coming to the realization that this doesn't need to be healed. Himawari did an incredible job. Now, while this moment may seem relatively nondescript, a way for Ikimoto to show us that Inajin is still alive, a couple of key and crucial things happen during this interaction that make it slightly suspect. See, a moniker that we've adopted on this channel is that Kishimoto never does anything for nothing. We now obviously have to kind of adapt that saying because a recent interview with Ikimoto and Kakashi in Paris revealed that Ikimoto's doing basically 99.9% of the writing for Boruto, and therefore the saying is now Ikimoto doesn't do anything for nothing. Because amongst all of the action that was happening in Chapter 14, all of the exposition that was given, all of the reveals of new Shinjus, and so much more, genuinely, the one thing that I'm more hung up on than anything is something that Sakura says in passing. See, after relaying the information that Inajin's wound has been completely healed by the likes of Himawari, Sakura says it seems as though the flow of chakra has been blocked. But it's okay, I should be able to manage the restoring of the flowing of chakra manually. Now, while some would argue that this is just a way for Ikimoto to explain to us why Inajin, though fully healed, is still unconscious, regardless of how you look at it, this is a weird addition from Ikimoto. See, not only does it raise the question of what happens to somebody after their chakra flow is stopped for a couple of hours, but it also raises questions like, what stopped Inajin's chakra flow? Was it Himawari's healing, or was it the wood jutsu that Inajin was punctured with? On top of all of that, the idea that Inajin's chakra flow has been halted for a matter of hours draws the average Naruto-knowing mind back to different circumstances where chakra flow is either disturbed or fully halted. And therefore, a curious mind asks the question, was Inajin's chakra flow stopped for some greater reason? And could that greater reason be to break Inajin out of omnipotence? Well, today we're going to be trying to answer that question, because today we're talking Boruto's newest ally, revealed. Before we get to revealing anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you want to hear me talk about all anime and manga, go ahead and follow my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime and manga. Or if you want to see me try to bring real-life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow the brand new channel that I created with Stephen Heat, Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you want to hear me talk about anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Talkers Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So, as a lifelong Boruto fan, I've learned to realize when some things are up. While my predictions may not be 100% accurate, usually if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, I don't know what ducks look like. And the idea of Ikimoto needlessly, at least to me, adding in the idea that Inajin's chakra flow has been stopped looks like what people have described to me what ducks look like. But once again, I cannot conceptualize them. Well, see, because you could absolutely make the argument that, oh, Ikimoto just simply said that Inajin's chakra flow had been halted to explain why he was still unconscious. It could just as easily be explained that Inajin is still unconscious because his body needs rest after healing from such an egregious wound. Or maybe that Himawari wasn't able to restore all of the blood that he needed, and so he's feeling anemic and therefore still unconscious. And yet Ikimoto decided to go with the reasoning for Inajin's unconsciousness. It ties its roots back to some pretty important consequences. See, like we've already touched on, there's really only two scenarios in the Naruto universe where chakra flow is completely disturbed. And one of those scenarios is Gentle Fist, while the other usually revolves around Genjutsu. See, Genjutsu, for those of you who don't know, is a delicate dance between the caster and the cast. The victim? We'll go with the victim. See, Genjutsu is a tug-of-war, a chakra-controlled tug-of-war, where the person who's trying to place somebody else under Genjutsu has to have greater chakra control than the person they're placing under Genjutsu, because they have to control their chakra network to manipulate their 5 senses. Now, this is why somebody like Sakura is effectively immune to Genjutsu, because Sakura's chakra control is better than basically everybody else in the universe, and therefore she can't lose that tug-of-war. And Sakura has always had fantastic chakra control. This is why during the Konoha Crush Shark, she was able to snap herself and a lot of the rest of the Konoha 12 out of the genjutsu that was cast on the entire stadium in the Chunin exams. And the way that Sakura was able to snap the people around her out of that genjutsu is very similar to the way that a tailed beast is able to snap their perfect Jinchuriki out of genjutsu. See, breaking somebody out of genjutsu is a bit more complicated than just placing a hand on them and saying release. Because in actuality, what's going on here is that the person breaking somebody else out of genjutsu is shooting their own chakra into that person's chakra network to disrupt the flow of chakra that's being manipulated by the genjutsu's caster. And this is effectively what a tailed beast does with a perfect Jinchuriki. However, because you don't need an outside force like Sakura to come around, place a hand on you, and inject chakra into your system, it's obviously gonna be a stronger system for a perfect Jinchuriki. But unfortunately, when it comes down to it, we don't know if either of these scenarios revolve around the full halting of somebody's chakra flow. That is to say that while it is loosely implied that the disruption of somebody's chakra flow probably is something like halting their chakra flow to snap them out of a genjutsu, kind of like Narcan does to somebody on an opioid overdose, we can't say for certain. Maybe it increases their chakra flow to shock them out of the genjutsu. But the most important takeaway here when understanding how genjutsu works and how to break somebody out of it is that in some way or another, chakra flow needs to be disrupted to break the control of the genjutsu caster. Now, the other way in which chakra flow is manipulated is the Gentle Fist, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with genjutsu and is rather just an application of injecting chakra into some of the 360 tenketsu points on somebody's body to either shut down the chakra flow through that tenketsu point or to amplify it. And thus in that way, Gentle Palm can either be used to shut somebody down or amplify them. And thus, while we've never seen Gentle Fist used to snap somebody out of genjutsu, it would stand to reason that if you use Gentle Fist on enough of somebody's tenketsu points, you could probably break them out of genjutsu. But the real important takeaway when considering how Gentle Fist plays into chakra flow is that during Neji and Hinata's fight, we got an explanation from Rock Lee that told us the circulatory system of the chakra network in somebody's body ties so incredibly closely to vital organ operations that the halting of chakra flow can not only lead to body parts not working, but also just lead to death, as chakra, as we know it, is as important a life force as things like blood in the Naruto universe. This is why the prospect of running out of chakra in the Naruto universe is considered a death sentence. Because once you're out of chakra, because human bodies have become so reliant on chakra in the Naruto universe, that with no chakra, the body basically ceases to function. Now, this would mean that if somebody's chakra flow was halted entirely, they would probably die, at least if it was held over a continuous period. And for those of you who are saying,
oh, but Nick, wouldn't they still have chakra? It's not like they would be out.
Well, yes, they would still have chakra, even if the chakra wasn't necessarily flowing through the body at that moment. But if you die of a heart attack, it's not like you don't still have blood in your system. Chakra flow is as important as having chakra, or at least it should be if it abides by the rules of things like a circulatory system. And therefore, the idea that the entirety of Inojin's chakra flow has stopped is kind of crazy. That'd be like if one day after recovering from a gun wound, I was in the hospital and the doctor said, yeah, he's fine. His blood's not moving, but he's fine. To which my family would have to respond, oh, okay, so he's not fine? But even if we do assume that you can continue to exist without your chakra flowing, that still doesn't answer a couple of very key questions that we should have about this moment. The first of which is, what stopped his chakra flow? See, I genuinely believe that's the most important and pressing question we should be considering surrounding this event, because simply being injured shouldn't have been enough to stop his chakra flow. Yes, obviously, he was injured roughly around his solar plexus, which is where chakra wells in the human body in the Naruto universe, but simply having that part of his body punched out and then healed shouldn't have stopped all chakra flow. It should have hindered it. Maybe as his life force had gone lower, his chakra flow should have gone lower, but a complete and total stop is curious. So why? Why did that happen? Well, really, when it comes down to it, there's only two ways to answer that question. Either it was getting punched in the chest with the wood jutsu of Jura, or being healed by Himawari. One of those two things had to be the thing that stopped Inojin's chakra flow. So let's consider the validity of both of them. You can make a genuine argument for either of these explanations being why Inojin's chakra flow was stopped. Let's talk about Himawari's healing first. Like we've already covered, while there is 360 tenketsu points in the body and the chakra circulatory system covers basically every nook and cranny of the body, right about in the solar plexus, maybe down a little bit further into the gut, is where chakra wells in the human body. It's why every single time that we see somebody use the Byakugan, the biggest fire of chakra burning inside of them is in their stomach area. There is a possibility that while Inojin was run through by the wood jutsu of Jura, that this area was damaged, and that Himawari, amazing as her healing abilities might be, only had the ability to heal the flesh, blood, and bone of Inojin's body, and not the chakra networks. Now, this wouldn't be the craziest thing of all time, and it would also serve well to kind of nerf Himawari's seemingly limitlessly powerful healing ability. I mean, Himawari has already somewhat effortlessly healed her leg wound, Inojin's chest wound, Sarada and Boruto's tailed beast wounds, all at the low cost of what appears to be nothing at all. Well, yes, her connection to Kurama is still incredibly mysterious, and any healing factor revolving around Kurama has never really been fully explained. The idea that Himawari has access to a limitless ability to heal anybody's injuries doesn't feel very Naruto and doesn't feel very well written. In fact, one of the biggest complaints out of the Naruto community is that towards the end of the war arc, Naruto turned into Ninja Jesus and was able to save the likes of Might Guy and Obito, albeit shortly. Briefly is the word I was looking for. And yet, here we are, staring down the barrel of the prospects of Ninja Jesus 2.0. However, Himawari's healing ability doesn't seem to be tied to a sun seal that will fade whenever she uses it to seal Kaguya away for the third time. No, instead, her healing ability seems to be tied to her? See, because here's the thing. Himawari has displayed the ability to heal people both in her Jinchuriki mode and outside of it. Himawari healed her leg and Inojin's chest wound while in her, let's call it, Kushina mode. However, after Himawari is extradited from her battle against Jura by Boruto, she goes on to, after regaining consciousness, heal not only Sarada, but also Boruto. And thus, seemingly out of nowhere, we have the greatest healing prodigy of all time in Himawari. That seems kind of broken to introduce out of the blue, so how do we nerf it at least a little bit? Well, we can't nerf it by saying that Himawari can only access it when she's in her Kushina mode, because that's already been proven untrue. So a good way to nerf it would be to say that while Himawari can heal basically any and all injuries, she can't pay attention to the things that your average medical ninjutsu user would be able to pay attention to, like the reconstruction of a chakra network. And thus getting healed by Himawari is not nearly as useful as it might seem. See, while Himawari may be able to save your life and reattach an arm, you may now no longer be able to channel chakra through that arm, which means you wouldn't be able to do things like generate a Rasengan or a Chidori with that arm. And that would lead to some rather interesting situations where Himawari has to decide if it's appropriate to heal people in that moment or not. But that isn't the only possibility. The other possibility is that it all ties back to Jura's wood release. And honestly, when it comes down to it, while I do enjoy the premise of Himawari's healing ability being nerfed just a little bit, the idea that it was Jura's wood release makes a bit more sense when we're considering why Inojin's chakra flow has been blocked. See, wood jutsu has always been known for its chakra absorption abilities. And though, while the privilege of having your chakra absorbed by wood jutsu is usually reserved for the likes of tailed beasts, I reckon that the wood jutsu that the Shinju are using isn't anything like the wood jutsu that Hashirama was using. Unless, of course, you abide by the idea that all wood jutsu is tied back to the divine tree in some capacity or another. But the important takeaway here is that wood jutsu has always been known for its ability to absorb chakra. And if we're going forward with the idea that Jura is controlling the roots of a divine tree as opposed to traditional wood jutsu so far as we understand it through Hashirama's eyes, that kind of doubles down on the idea of chakra absorption. Because think about it. The entire purpose of a divine tree is to absorb chakra from everything. Whether that everything is an animal, a human, a tree, or the globe itself, a Ten-Tails, when fed an Otsutsuki, becomes a divine tree, and that divine tree shoots its roots into the earth, absorbing the entirety of the chakra of that planet and creating a chakra fruit so that chakra fruit can be consumed by an Otsutsuki. And we've already seen that the wood release used by the Ten-Tails, and therefore by extension the Claw Grimes, has the ability to absorb the chakra of people that it happens to get its mouth on. What do I mean by that? Well, the Claw Grimes, who are essentially the parents of all of the Shinju, created the Shinju by biting into people. And thus, after biting into these people, they're able to grow a tree around this person and seep their chakra into what we can presume to be the ground. This failed divine tree, which pulls the chakra of the person that was bit by a Claw Grime into the ground, can later then be used to create Shinju. But this means that the wood release used by the Claw Grimes has already shown a chakra absorption ability, and a chakra absorption ability that goes beyond the scope of just-tailed beasts. And thus when Inojin was punched through the center of his chest by the wood release of Jura, that wood release that he sat on for at least a couple of seconds absorbed the majority of his chakra, halting his chakra flow. And maybe, just maybe, because Himawari's healing ability differs from that of her father when he was Ninja Jesus, because Naruto's Sun Seal healing ability was built on the fact that he had an abundance of life force and chakra, and therefore he could share that abundance with the people around him. But Himawari's healing ability works fundamentally differently, as she's simply reconstructing the bodies of those who were injured back to their true forms, and therefore because her healing application requires the physical idea of what you're reconstructing, as opposed to just dumping chakra and life force into somebody to stop them from dying, that Himawari was unable to undo this chakra absorption from the likes of Jura. But I said something in there that's kind of important. See, because while the idea of healing through the power of Kurama's chakra is nothing new, Himawari and Naruto approach it in fundamentally different ways. A large aspect of the 4th grade Shinobi World War is Naruto sharing his chakra with the Shinobi Alliance. And upon receiving Naruto's chakra, or I guess Kurama's chakra, members of the Shinobi Alliance not only got boosts in their chakra reserves, their strength, and their speed, but also in their ability to recover. And this is something that we've seen time and time again in the Naruto universe. More chakra equals more life force equals healing ability. This is why the Uzumaki were able to survive things like a Jinchuriki extraction, or possibly things like the Reaper Death Seal. This is why Hashirama had a natural healing factor that required no hand signs. And this is why Naruto, in his KCM2 form, is able to recover from what should be fatal injuries. Abundance of life force always leads to a healing factor. However, Hinata notably does not have an abundance of life force. In fact, she has but a mere portion of Kurama's power. And therefore, the way that she has to approach healing people, even though she doesn't necessarily understand it yet herself, is different from that of Naruto, who's simply able to share the abundance of his life force. And thus, the healing feats that we've seen from Naruto may not line up with the healing feats that we see from Himawari. And if we're being real with ourselves, they already haven't lined up, which goes to strengthen the idea that Himawari may not have the ability to reconstruct chakra networks, or at the very least doesn't have the ability to reinvigorate somebody with chakra, as she doesn't have the abundance to share that her father did. But even all of that isn't necessarily the most important takeaway from this chapter. See, what's truly important is that Inojin's chakra flow was halted for a couple of hours, at the least. In fact, Inojin's chakra flow could have been disrupted for literally days. We don't know how much time has passed, though it's probably only been a couple of hours. And maybe more importantly than anything, Inojin's chakra flow is now currently being reset by the likes of Sakura. And whether that means that Sakura is rebuilding his chakra network through medical ninjutsu or just giving him a jumpstart, Sakura being the person controlling your chakra is an interesting spot to be in. See, because like we've already established, Sakura is basically immune to genjutsu. And if we're approaching omnipotence as a genjutsu, as we probably should, as it was specifically stated that all jutsu, genjutsu included, came from shinjutsu, and therefore shinjutsu should probably fall under the same categorization as something like Izanagi, as it's a genjutsu that can be placed on the entirety of the universe and made physical through yin-yang release probably, then it's safe to assume that those who have a high immunity to genjutsu probably have a higher immunity to omnipotence. Now, does this mean that Sakura is immune to omnipotence? No, probably not. Sakura is in an incredibly weird position in Konoha, and I think genuinely the worst thing about this chapter is that we didn't dive into that at all. And like, Sakura's husband abandoned her to go live with a traitor, and her daughter is very vehement about the fact that that traitor is actually a good guy. If Sakura is truly affected by omnipotence, she is the only person in her house who is, and yet we reintroduced her basically as a plot device to tell us that Inojin is alive, without acknowledging just how weird her situation is. But if we assume that Sakura's not broken out of omnipotence, because she probably isn't, because her being broken out of omnipotence would be what I wanted, and I've learned from recent chapters that I'm just not gonna get what I want, at the very least Sakura would be trying to restart what was a halted chakra flow. And the precision of Sakura's chakra flow trying to pull something like this off, combined with the fact that Inojin's chakra flow has been shut off for the last couple of hours, could yield a very interesting result. And that result, at least for Inojin, would be being broken out of genjutsu, or, like we've been hinting at, being broken out of omnipotence. See, because I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. Ino turning into a cop who's not going to help Shikamaru help Boruto, I did not see coming. Ino is privy to as much information about omnipotence and the Shinju as Shikamaru was. The only key difference between Ino and Shikamaru in terms of the information that they have is that Shikamaru heard Amado talk about how he believes his memories were altered. And well, obviously Shikamaru is way smarter than Ino. I'm not saying that they're even close to each other in intelligence. We've seen that if anybody has doubts about omnipotence and they're able to confirm their doubts about omnipotence, they're usually able to break themselves out. Now I figured that Shikamaru flying to the side of Team Boruto and talking to Boruto about the truth of the events that happened over the last couple of years would be enough evidence to break Ino out. But I was wrong, because when Shikamaru reaches out to Ino to connect Shikamaru and Boruto while Boruto is being interrogated in chapter 14, Ino says no, staunchly aligning herself with Konoha, which is the exact opposite of what I thought she was going to do, because I thought she had enough information and therefore enough motivation to tell Team 10 about what was going on with omnipotence. But I did admit in that video the idea of Ino, Sakura, Team 10, Mitsuki, Sumire, Sarada, Kashin Koji, and a bunch of other people all being on Boruto's side kind of cheapens the firing of omnipotence. And therefore, I can't say I'm necessarily upset with the fact that Ino isn't Team Boruto. Well, I think it's kind of silly that she wasn't the person assigned to extract all of Boruto's information. I understand why she wasn't, considering the fact her son is in the hospital. And therefore, I find that the infinitely more likely and more narratively sound way for Shikamaru and Boruto to remain in touch now that Ino has aligned themselves with Konoha and Kawaki is that, like with the rest of Boruto, the new generation replaces the old. See, while it's been a clear and present struggle of Inojin to try and be remotely as good a censor as his mother, there was just a 3-year time skip, of which everybody should have come back stronger from. And therefore the possibility that Inojin is at least half as good as a censor and therefore has half the range as Ino is not crazy. Yes, Inojin isn't fully Yamanaka, but Boruto isn't fully Uzumaki, and he's got the most chakra out of anybody we've ever seen. There's a definitive possibility for Inojin to be a fantastic censor, and now the stage is set for him to step into that role. See if Inojin's chakra being halted for a couple of hours was truly enough to break him out of omnipotence. Now, not only do we have a feasible means to break other people out of omnipotence, but also Inojin gets to take a step forward in terms of plot importance. He gets to act as the liaison between Boruto and Shikamaru, so they can continue to communicate, and Boruto can continue to visit Konoha in some capacity or another. See, because Shikamaru's remembrance of omnipotence and how it works is already beginning to fade, and therefore without a constant stream of communication to Boruto, Shikamaru will not be Team Boruto for much longer. And thus if Inojin were to step in to replace his mother as the cell phone that Shikamaru and Boruto communicate with that Ada isn't able to listen to, it would not only work as a way to solidify Inojin's doubts, but also Shikamaru's. But you're probably asking yourself,
But Nick, why does Inojin need to be more plot relevant? What, are we gonna make Cho-Cho more plot relevant next?
and like, no. Probably not. But here's the thing. If Ikimoto should have learned one thing from Kishimoto, it's that the Konoha 12's biggest problem was the 12 part. And I'd like to think that Ikimoto did learn from Kishimoto in that regard, as the Konoha 12 is now effectively the Konoha 7, Team 10, and Sumire. And we'd be lying to ourselves if we said that Team 10 hasn't had a bigger role in 2 Blue Vortex than they had in part 1 of Boruto. And while Shikadai is always going to have a massive amount of import in this story as the next generation Shikamaru, because there was too many characters to build out on, as characters like Neji, Shikamaru, Rock Lee, Team 7 basically took up all the airtime. However, there has been a couple of subliminal markers to show us that Inojin is going to become more important in the story, if only as Himawari's potential future love interest.
But Nick, what could you possibly be talking about?
Well, when it comes down to it, Himawari is one of the main characters of Boruto, which means eventually in some capacity or another, be it in a time skip or just by the end of the story, she will end up with somebody. And it's already been pretty heavily implied that person is going to be Inojin. And for those of you being like, ew, they're so far apart, they're like 3 years apart. And I'm not saying it's gonna happen right now. When Inojin loses his ability to use his father's jutsu, Inojin goes to essentially train under Himawari so that Himawari can teach him to love art once again. And over the course of him learning from her, he gains a fascination for her love of art and learns to love art once again, which allows him to use Super Beast Scroll. And therefore, if we do genuinely believe that one day Inojin is gonna step up in a role as important as being with one of the MCs of this story, he should probably take a step up in terms of plot relevance, kind of like Hinata, and therefore he can't necessarily be relegated to the side, kind of like Cho-Cho. However, if Inojin does wake up and is no longer affected by omnipotence, that would not be as big a swing as if it were to be Ino, as Ino would obviously have the ability to reveal the truth of what happened with Naruto and Kawaki to everybody in a way that Ada wouldn't be able to hear. And while Inojin, as a fellow Yamanaka, may also have the ability to do do that, he doesn't necessarily have the position of power that would make people listen to him like if it was Ino. And that's why I think the idea of Inojin switching over to Team Boruto is not only more likely, but also more plot sound, because Inojin wouldn't be able to galvanize as many people as Ino would, and therefore him becoming Team Boruto wouldn't cheapen the firing of Omnipotence in the way that Ino becoming Team Boruto would. But then again, I put a video out a couple of days ago that said Ino will save Boruto, and Chapter 14 couldn't have proved me more wrong. Now, Chapter 14 did reveal that Juro was the Ten Tails, which I was the first person to predict, and it revealed that Mitsuki has officially switched over to Team Boruto, which I also predicted would happen on account of his Sage mode and access to nature energy, something he ironically accesses directly before helping Boruto. But then again, I also thought that the newest Shinju was going to be Baryon mode Naruto, so apparently my hit rate is 50%. So go ahead and flip a coin for me. I choose Tails. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Why do you believe the comment about Inojin's chakra flow being halted was made? Do you think it was just to explain why he's unconscious, or do you think there's something deeper? Tell me in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Come to my attention recently that some people get mad that I theorize, which I find funny because I'm just kind of having fun over here.